Arlington Toyota wants to know what drives you. Let's start with having 500 Toyotas available. Plus, you get a lifetime warranty and 30 days to love your new purchase or exchange it. What drives you is what we do. Shop arlingtontoyota.com today.
Hey, welcome into this episode of The Book of Beau, brought to you by Arlington Toyota. Get 30 days to love your purchase or exchange it. Shop arlingtontoyota.com.
But now we get to my guy, okay? To our guy. To Jacksonville's own. To Tony Boselli. I wish you could have all gone with me that many, many years ago when I went out to work Tony out.
I was born in Modesto, California, but at age 2, I moved to Boulder, Colorado. So I consider myself from Colorado. Okay. I don't remember living in California. How about that?
This is the University of Southern California, standing proudly on the threshold of its second century. 100 years of academic excellence, private support, and responsible independent education.
But Big Beau got the chance to return to the state he was born in while on recruiting visits. And when it came time to visit Southern California, it was love at first sight, literally.
See the Heisman trophies, the history. Some of the greatest players ever played the game of football played at USC. They were just finishing off the 3 straight years of going to the Rose Bowl. I was just, like, it was such an easy decision for me. Probably didn't hurt that they walked me by the pool, and there was some very attractive co-eds. As a 17-year-old young man, that doesn't, I don't know if they did it on purpose or not, but it worked. And thankfully, I found one of them to be my wife. So in the big scheme of things, it was right where I was supposed to be.
This is the Book of Beau. I'm Dan Hicken.
We get to USC when the freshmen report, and we're all in the team meeting room, and you have to stand up and introduce yourself.
That's Jeff Kopp, another member of the USC freshman class in 1991.
I'll never forget this. He's sitting to my left. He stands up and introduces himself, and he's 6'7", like 250. And I'm like, tight end, Right. And he's like offensive tackle, and I'm kind of like, who's this skinny dork?
But in a freshman class that featured 3 future first-round draft picks, that nerdy-looking kid out of Boulder, Colorado, quickly made an impression on then-head coach Larry Smith and the Trojans coaching staff.
I remember coming in as a freshman, and the first practice I was on the scout team, which I expected to be. That's where you go. And John Matsko, who's my offensive line coach, he came to me in between practice and says, hey, you're the backup off the tackle. You're going to back up Pat Harlow. I'm like, okay. And he goes, you're going to practice with us now. And so so I literally practiced one practice of my entire college career on scout team.
Back then, almost everybody redshirted. So you would have 5 years of college. Well, so most of us redshirted. William McGinnis and Curtis Conway didn't redshirt, right? They're enough said. And but Tony ends up backing up Pat Harlow, who was a first-round draft pick that year. He's first-round draft pick by the Patriots. So Tony's backing Pat Harlow up his entire true freshman year.
Pat was really instrumental, kind of the approach and the physicality. And he had a nastiness about him. He was very aggressive. And that's kind of how I learned to play the position. And Coach Matsko, who was a tough, hard-nosed coach, taught me how to pass block. I never pass blocked in high school. I mean, I didn't even know what I was doing. And so that was a really good situation for me to watch Pat, how he did it, to learn from him, to be able to spend more time with Coach Matsko that year.
Big Beau got on the field for a grand total of 0 snaps during the 1991 season. His red shirt preserved, sure. But meanwhile, back at USC,
he makes the travel squad, so he travels every away game. Well, the rest of us are just hanging out at home, having a good old time. And Tony was actually kind of upset. It's like the first time you go to a game, he travels, it's like, it's cool. Then he realizes that all of his buddies are just hanging out at home, doing what college kids do and experiencing college. And he's kind of like, oh man, this kind of sucks,
They tell me all the stories of them going out, what they were doing on Friday night, and I was at the team. But I wouldn't have done it. I didn't feel like I missed anything.
Tony's high school experience at Fairview High School while playing for San Pagano had prepared him for his true freshman season at USC.
He handled it well because he had the experience of not really playing, for Sam. And so in college, Tony handled, being redshirted. He didn't really play. And that was fine for us. We went anyway, We're all like, do you think we'll get in? I didn't understand that you're redshirted, you're probably not going to get in as a freshman. But I'm like, okay, are you getting in? Mom, no, I don't think so. I go, but why not?
Moo, Candy, and her new husband, Fred, Big Tony, and his new wife, Carla. They were at every game. Big Tony was also instrumental in another, let's call it, experience that first year in Los Angeles.
My freshman year is winding down, and I want to stay in LA for the summer. My dad does not want me to stay. He wants me to come home. And I said, well, Dad, I got a job. SC's giving me a job, and they're going to pay me like $10 an hour. Well, back then, $10 an hour was a ton of money. Just in comparison, my dad was paying me minimum wage to work at McDonald's a few years earlier, like at $3.35 an hour. So like $10 an hour, I was going to be rich. And I said, Dad, I got a job. And I said, I'm getting paid $10 an hour. So unless you can find me a job making $10 an hour, I just can't come home. Which my dad respected because he was a business guy. And I thought I had him. I'm like, got him. I'm going to stay in LA. And about a week later, he says, I got you a job, making $10 an hour. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. He says, you are going to go work at the convent on the farm and help the nuns with all their acreage and mowing fields and fixing fences and taking care of the animals. And what happened is my dad and my uncle basically donated my services to the Catholic Church.
Mowing the lawn, taking care of the animals, Big Beau did it all at the Abbey of St. Walburga, growing bigger and stronger every day. It helped the nuns fed him dinner-sized lunches every single day, too. Tony returned to USC in the fall, ready to step in for the departed Pat Harlow as the Trojans' starting left tackle.
Tony's upside was huge because he was still operating a left tackle as just a young, almost a kid, right? He's just not matured. He's not filled out yet. But his feet and his leverage and his athletic skills and his competitive, nature were, they were already, a 10.
Redshirt freshman year, it was, I don't know, I think it was like in October, November, and we got a call from the coach, his offensive line coach. And he said, I see you're not on the list to come for the football banquet. And I said, well, I got the invitation. I didn't even know you'd do a football banquet in college. You mean it's like I have to go to another football banquet? I said, I live in Colorado. And he's like, you need to come. I go, okay, is something wrong? Why do I need to come? And he said, well, you can't tell him, but he's been voted by his team members as offensive freshman of the year. He said, that never happens. I'm like, okay, we'll be there.
And while Big Beau was humbled to receive the award from his teammates, it became yet another trophy thrown away in the back of the closet.
He never told us. I only found out if I read something. So it's like all the hoopla for him was he wasn't interested in. He just wanted to be a really good football player.
in Tony, you knew that Tony was going to be a very, very high round draft pick, but he never acted like, especially around the roommates. The roommate situation that we had there was, if he did act like that, it would have been, if you had thin skin, there was 5 roommates in that house, and if you had thin skin, you could never be one of our roommates. It was brutal. But there was an honesty and there was a loyalty. You knew that every guy that lived in that house was 100% supportive of the other guy, had each other's back, and work hard, play hard, everything was done together.
That animal house also came to include Tony's buddy from Fairview High School, Joe Barry, who had transferred to USC from Michigan for Tony's redshirt sophomore year. No one had a front row seat to those early chapters of the Book of Beau better than Joe B.
When I get there, number one, he was probably 70 pounds heavier than, that little snot-nosed junior that I played with. People use the word swagger now, but Tony played with a confidence, an air, a swagger, a physical, just dominant mindset where it didn't matter who the hell was lining up over him. He was gonna kick his ass. And when you play at Michigan or you play at USC, you play with a lot of 5 stars and a lot of 4 stars and a lot of great players, but little did we know at the time, we were playing with a NFL Hall of Famer.
But remember how Tony would throw all his trophies in the back of his closet?
And Steve's like, do you really not think he's very good? And I go, I know he's not good. I know he doesn't start.
Yeah, you're not going to want to miss this plot twist.
Hope you're enjoying this episode of The Book of Beau, brought to you by Arlington Toyota. Get 30 days to love your purchase or exchange it. Shop arlingtontoyota.com. Now back to The Book of Beau.
And everybody at some point, when you play the game, you get hurt. There's just no way around it. And we knew, after Tony starts his freshman year and he makes freshman All-American and he's a Playboy All-American the next year. And I don't even think that's a thing anymore, which is hilarious. Tony was in Playboy.
Big Beau's injury history in the NFL, well known. Many believe it's part of what delayed his Pro Football Hall of Fame selection. But he had his fair share at USC too. One break, though, proved luckier than the rest.
My redshirt sophomore year, so my 3rd football season, I banged up my ankle in the game and I was going to the locker room end of the season and she's walking down the tunnel because she was actually a recruiting guide at the time. I didn't even know.
She was Angie Aylor, a pretty blonde former Miss Teen California who Tony had previously bumped into on campus. Don't worry, we'll get to that story in just a second. Angie was also a high school friend of Tony's roommate and USC quarterback, Rob Johnson.
I hadn't seen her for like a year probably. And I said hi, and we started talking just real briefly. And then about a week later, I went and asked Rob, I said, hey, is Angie still dating that guy? And she says, no, she broke up with him. And I said, okay, perfect. And so I asked her out, and the rest is history.
Oh, come on, Big Beau. We're not going to let you off that easily. Truth was, Tony and Angie had met at a dance marathon for freshman sorority and fraternity pledges.
We were stuck together for 6 hours, and it was a blast. And he was relentless and hilarious. I had a boyfriend, and the entire time he kept going, you need to break up with that slap. What do you could be with me right now. And I was like, well, I'm not. I am with someone else,
come on. You're going to say no?
And I was like, will you stop it? Come on, focus. We got a dance marathon to complete here, And
Beau and the boys would see Angie around campus, but until that run-in in the stadium tunnel, to Tony's knowledge, she was still with that slap.
And I give her a hard time to this day about how she wasted 2 years of her life. By not saying yes right there. It was probably the best because I'm not sure we might not be married today if she would have said yes, knowing my knucklehead self at, I was 18 years old.
Once they finally did go on that first date, there was no turning back. Both were head over heels for each other.
Tony really didn't date a lot in high school or college. He was kind of a groupie, they'd all go together as a group. Maybe other things were going on behind the scenes, I don't know, but it was always a group of kids. And then, you know, he met this girl that didn't go to USC during some, I don't know, the Bob Hope Playboy thing or whatever. And we thought, oh, okay. And then that disappeared. And then all of a sudden he was like, I'm coming to call, or I'm coming home. Oh, good. I'm bringing a girl. And we all said, okay, well, this must be it, because he's never brought a girl home. He's never said, I'm really interested in anybody. And so we were all behind the scenes going, oh, maybe this is it. Ooh, can't wait to meet her. And she was delightful.
Angie admits they almost eloped on that drive back from Colorado. The funny part is, even after that meeting in the tunnel, even after dating for 6+ months, Angie had no idea who Tony really was in college football folklore.
It was the night before the Freedom Bowl game, and I had just made the cheerleading team, and this was my very first football game. I had done a couple basketball games, and because they made the bowl game, we got to cheer at a football game. So this was my very first football game. He asked me out the night before. I had a curfew, and he didn't. And I was thinking, oh, poor guy. He must not play or matter, because I'm sure the guys that have to play, you know, have a curfew. And so I was like, I'm sorry, I can't. I have a curfew, don't you? And he's like, no. You know, some of the guys do, but I don't. And it didn't register to me that he didn't, because he didn't. But the reality is he was injured. And so the next day at the football game, I'm looking for him. I'm looking for him in his uniform. I'm looking for him on the field. And he strolls up wearing jeans, a t-shirt, and like a windbreaker, a burgundy USC windbreaker. And he's got normal tennis shoes on. He doesn't have no appendages are wrapped, or has no crutches. He's not limping. He doesn't have a cast on his arm. And so I'm thinking, that's why he didn't have a curfew. He doesn't play. You know?
But over the next 6 months, Big Beau won Angie over with his determination, his persistence, and yes, even his brains. The trip to Colorado was a success. Then Tony had to head to the Walter Camp All-American Camp over the 4th of July holiday.
I didn't realize that Walter Camp was a human being and that it was like a big honor. I thought Walter Camp was a camp that guys that weren't very good went to try to get on the field.
With Tony out of town, Angie went home and was enjoying the 4th on a family friend's boat. Aboard was Angie's childhood friend and Stanford quarterback, Steve Stenstrom, along with several of his offensive linemen.
Steve says to me, oh, heard you're dating the big man on campus. And I, laughed at him. I'm like, well, he's not quite the quarterback, but he is a very big man, and he said, no, like, he's awesome. And I was like, ha ha ha, we can't all be quarterbacks. We can't all be the big stud. I'm like, he's not even here to defend himself right now. You be nice, and the one guy that was with him was like, no, I watch film on him. He's awesome. And I think that Steve's put these guys up to like this, to harass me. And I'm like, you're very funny, and I was like, obviously you start, and he's like, yeah, I do. And, your boyfriend's got great footwork. And I'm like, thanks, Steve. This is, I'm really like, and they're starting to like realize that I am like clueless. And Steve's like, do you really not think he's very good? And I go, I know he's not good. I know he doesn't start. I'm like, but he's amazing. And he's like, do you know where he is right now? And I go, yes, I do. I know he's at Walter Camp. And they're like, Walter, what's Walter Camp? I'm like, football camp? And they all like hit the deck, literally. They're like, shut up. You're really smart, but you're not acting very smart right now. And I was like, what's Walter Camp? They're like, it's not what's Walter Camp, it's who's Walter Camp? And I'm like, at this point, I literally am like lost. I'm like, what? And they're like, Walter Camp is the Walter Camp All-American. It's like the highest football accolade for collegiate athletes. And I was like, what? And they're like, yes. I'm like, he just told me he had some Walter Camp thing. He didn't tell me what it was.
With no cell phones and no internet readily available, the guys drove Angie to a local convenience store. There, gracing the cover of a Pac-12 preseason football magazine, Big Beau.
You would not ever know from Tony that he was great because he would not tell you that. So you can't blame a girl for not knowing these things.
Like Mumu had found years earlier, Tony was still throwing those trophies into the back of the closet. And as Jeff Kopp joked, Tony wore the same 3 or 4 shirts every day. This guy didn't act like a future millionaire. But as Angie would soon learn, that upcoming football season, Tony's redshirt junior year, it was supposed to be Tony's last at USC.
I was going to leave after my junior year. I actually had some people after my redshirt sophomore year say, hey, you'd be a first-round pick if you left, and I was All-American. And back then, no one really left that early, and so I didn't think about it. But I was definitely going to leave after my junior year.
Tony's redshirt year not only featured tons of preseason draft buzz, longtime former USC coach John Robinson had returned to Southern Cal for a second stint with the Trojans as head coach. Along with Coach Robinson came a new offensive line coach, but a very familiar face for Tony, Mike Berry, Joe Barry's father.
Even as intense and as tough and just, grit mindset as Tony was, I think when, the first time that, he walked into the meeting room and my dad was the O-line coach, he was like, oh, hey, it's Joe B's dad. And my dad, took on the approach. My dad always tells the story. He knew how great Tony was going to be. And my dad took the mindset that he was like, okay, as good as this guy's been, he's like, I'm going to push him and I'm going to get him to be the greatest, the best.
Tony was a bit surprised at the tough love, but took it in stride. After all, he was leaving after this season anyways for the NFL, despite his mother's insistence he stay and get his degree. But before Mike Berry could really take the All-American left tackle to another level, disaster struck in Game 3.
We're playing up in Arizona, where they have the best defense in the history of college football. And I'm blocking Teddy Bruschi, actually, and the right tackle gets beat, sacks the quarterback, and drives him into the back of my knee, and I dislocate my kneecap. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I thought, I looked down and my kneecap's on the side of my leg, and I'm thinking, oh, my life is over.
We were all thinking, we're like, oh my God, is his career over?
Thankfully, the injury wasn't as bad as originally feared. Tony only missed 5 games, returning to play in the Trojans bowl game. But he didn't have the junior year he wanted.
Of course he was frustrated. I mean, he's competitive. Any competitor, when you remove the thing that you love doing and you have to sit and watch, that's a big stretching of who you are and stretching of your your mental toughness. I think you become way more mentally tough because you've dealt with time away from the thing that you love.
All the projections were still I'd be a first-round pick, probably late first-rounder. And so I was still thinking about leaving. And I remember John Robinson called me into his office and he says, hey, Tony, I want to talk to you. And I said, okay. So he sat me down. He says, hey, listen, I don't think you should leave. And I'm like, okay. And he says, one, I don't think you're ready. He goes, you'll be a first-rounder. But I'm talking about really being the player you can be. He says, if you'll come back and do what I tell you to be, he goes, I think you can be a top 10 pick. And he said, and he laid out a plan. He had a plan. It's like, you're not going to do spring ball. You're going to work out. You're going to do this. You're going to do that. And so I laid the whole thing out.
It was a big decision, a huge decision, the first of many forks in the road Big Beau would face in the years to come. In the end, he decided to come back for his redshirt senior year. All he did was earn first-team All-Pac-10 honors for the 3rd year in a row, first-team All-American honors for the 3rd year in a row, and earned the Morris Trophy as the best lineman in the Pac-10.
To watch him rehab and work and prepare and basically prove everyone wrong that he came back in 94 and was even better after a incredibly devastating injury. And that 94 season, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to go back. I'm talking in the history of college football to see if there was a more dominating season by an offensive lineman.
He doesn't get beat unless someone falls into the back of his legs and, he trips. I mean, he's just that good. And so I think, you go into every single game and you just knew that you're not worried about that side. You're just not. That side doesn't need extra protection. They don't need to chip because Tony's got it locked down.
I love that my husband took the gamble. I love that he trusted John Robinson. I love that he got his degree. And I love that it actually was a dream come true. That it doesn't always work out. And to watch him take that risk. And I would say that story, sort of the story of our life, is he has never quit taking risks. He has never quit challenging himself. He has always banked on things will work out, and I will work hard enough to reap the maximum benefit.
That didn't happen without the tough love Mike Berry and John Robinson had promised when they arrived back on USC's campus.
You might have to bleep this out, but my dad took the mindset that he's like, I'm gonna be an asshole to this kid. I'm gonna be a prick. I'm gonna get him so pissed off every single day at me that he's gonna take it out on the guy that he's blocking.
They were ruthless and demanding, and because of that, my play changed. And I was good before. I was an All-American before, but I was better that last year. And he was right. He missed it. It wasn't top 10. It was top 5. So he was a little bit underplaying it.
So Tony Boselli, the tackle from Southern California,
Congratulations.
goes with the second pick to Jacksonville. USC offensive lineman, top 5 in the draft. 15 years ago, a young man by the name of Anthony Munoz went with the third pick to Cincinnati. He's going to be going to the Hall of Fame. Ron Yeri was the first pick at 68, but with the Vikings. Is he the similar quality player, Mel?
Cincinnati coveted Boselli. They certainly have had great success in the past with the offensive lineman taken high in the draft. In the same school as well. So, yes, there was some nervous moments.
We had about 8 coaches there, and they were all busting my chops. They said, Coach, who are you going to take? I said, we're probably going to take a receiver. They looked at me and they said, yeah, right.
Coming up on the Book of Beau.
We have a lot of guys coming together that have never really played together.
Tony was the consistent base for Jacksonville.
You never want to get hurt, but if you're going to get hurt during that training camp.
We lost the game because of illegal procedure. Get your ass down.
Hope you enjoyed this latest episode of The Book of Beau, brought to you by Arlington Toyota. Get 30 days to love your purchase or exchange it. Shop arlingtontoyota.com.